Good evening. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here tonight for, I believe this is the sixth and penultimate of these White Dudes for Harris organizing calls. As I've said before at the top of these, we do these because we want to give folks a space to get into action. The idea behind them is to get folks fired up, to learn something, especially thanks to our partners at the National Democratic Training Committee, and hear about potential volunteer opportunities that are happening around the country. Tonight, we have a really awesome lineup. We're really, really pumped. You'll hear from a couple of great folks. First, you'll hear from actor Ron Livingston, who's got something really fun planned for us. You'll hear from comedian, actor, activist, writer Adam Conover. And then you're going to get an awesome training from the National Democratic Training Committee on making a plan to vote. Last but not least, you're also going to hear from Aaron over at an organization called Men for Choice. They do really amazing work. And he's going to be talking about how we talk to other dudes about abortion, because that's one of the biggest issues in this election cycle. And we know that it's sometimes a little bit uncomfortable for dudes to talk about that with each other. Before we jump in, I just want to note that there's a QR code on your screen. You can scan it with your phone. You fill out the information, and that gives us the ability to send you more information on very specific volunteer opportunities that are happening around the country. That includes canvases, that includes phone banks, that includes text banks, that includes writing letters, all sorts of stuff. So we really want to be able to keep you up to date with the latest opportunities. And, with that, I am going to stop talking because you're here to hear from all the other folks. And I'm going to introduce to you Ron Livingston. Ron, take it away.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for having me, and thanks a lot for being here. This is the part where I usually talk for a couple of minutes about why I'm voting for Kamala Harris, why I think this election is important. I'm going to skip that because we're 14 days out, and I know that if you're on this call, that you already are considering voting for Kamala Harris, and you already think it's important, you wouldn't be here, right? Everybody's got a reason for being here. If you don't have your own reasons, then somebody in your life said, hey, come to this thing, and you have enough faith in them to go, all right, I'll check it out. I'll let them explain to you why it's important. But the part I want to address is because then you get to the part of yes, I want to help. This is important. I want to do this. What do I do? What do I do? It's the moment in the action movie before the action starts where the guy's just oh man, there's bad guys everywhere. They're messing everything up. What do I do? I don't know what to do. What do I do? All right. So I want to demonstrate, this is just a little thing about personal power and how you can help to get Kamala Harris elected. Okay. I'm going to ask you, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, and I want you to really do it. I can't see you, so I don't know if you're doing it or not, but I'm going to ask you to do it, is to just stand up. Stand up on your feet. If you can, if your body allows it, stand up on your feet. Here we are. Just touch your left elbow. Touch your right elbow. That's it. And I encourage you to, I know you might be following along going, yeah, where's this going? I want to see where it's going. Just stand up. What's it cost? Stand up. Left elbow, right elbow. All right, sit back down again. Without lying to me, because this would be a ridiculous thing to lie to me about. Type a Y into the chat or raise a hand or do something to make yourself known to the moderator if you did that. If you actually, in fact, stood up and touched your elbow. What do we got? Do we see anything in there? Do we get do we have anybody out there? Lots of Ys. Okay, I'm gonna do one more time, okay? You think maybe half the group, less than half the group?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of people.
60%. Okay, 60%. I want to talk to the other 40 because I don't know. Maybe you can't chat or whatever. I'm doing this because this is a demonstration, right, of going from frozen into action. And this is how we do it, and this is all it takes. So I'm going to ask that additional 40. The other 60, you want to do it again? Let's do it again. Why not? Let's stand up. Left elbow. Right elbow. Boom. All right. Let's see those Ys. Let's see those Ys. And if you were someone who didn't do it the first time, but you did it the second time, let's see like a double or triple Y. Anything? What do we get? All right. So here's my point, right? A stream of Ys, a lot of Ys. Wow, look at that. Some of you are probably gonna, at that moment, happen to just stand up and touch both of your elbows anyway. That's just what you do at this. But the rest of you, why did you do it? You did it because I asked you to. That's all it was. It was as simple as that. You don't really know me from Adam. I can't even see whether you did it or not, but there's something about the human psyche that if somebody says, this is important to me, will you do this? Right? And it doesn't cost you much of anything. You're just inclined to go, okay. So what I'm telling you, all right, is beyond the basics of you guys you're gonna fill out your ballot. You're gonna make sure you have your ballot. You're gonna make sure today's gonna be about figuring out how to get your vote counted. Okay. But I'm telling you, there's 14 days left. If you dropped everything, if you called into sick to work every single day, if you skipped school, if you blew everything off for 2 weeks and only got on phone banks, only went out and canvassed and knocked on doors, you would still be spending less hours on this than you probably spent picking your fantasy football team in the last year or two. Okay. Or like figuring out which car you might want to test drive if you won the lottery. Okay. It's not that much time. It's not that much energy. You can't put too much any time into it because there's not that time left. And I tell you, if you do those things and you ask people to go vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and to ask the people that they ask, like I just asked you to touch your elbows, people are going to do it. They're going to do it. And it's not going to be because you're an expert on elbows or you don't have to know a lot of things about politics. You don't have to know them. It's just a matter of that's your personal power as a human being. And it's kind of, I got to say, a little bit, if you're a white dude for Harris, people listen to white dudes a little bit more than they listen to a lot of other people. So that's a little superpower you carry around with you. So I'm gonna encourage you to, it may feel silly, felt a little silly to ask you to stand up and touch your elbows. And I wasn't even sure if you were gonna do it, but by God, you did it. You did it in floods. And that's what we're going to do for the next 2 weeks. That's how we are going to leverage our vote. That's how we are going to get thousands more of the people beyond the people on this call to also go out and vote. We're just going to ask them, and we're going to keep asking them. Some of you did it the first time. Some of you waited until the second time when I had to say, this is actually important. Please do this. And some of you actually needed me to explain why. I had to explain why it was important. And then you were like, oh, okay, I get it. Right? You're going to meet all three of those people out there. You're going to meet all three of those people out there, but you can have that impact, and I encourage you, go out and have that impact. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you, Ron. I actually did get up and touched my elbows, and I didn't do it in our rehearsal, but I did do it when you asked us to do it this last time. So thank you so much for being on. We really, really appreciate it. Means a lot. All right, up next, we have our next guest who is going to help get us fired up as well. We got Adam Conover. Adam, I'm just going to kick it to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Ross. So wonderful to be on this Zoom again. It's really awesome. By the way, the panelists could see me stand up and touch my elbows. I hope Ron appreciated that I actually did do it. And I appreciate that so many of you did it as well. I checked on YouTube. I saw about 300 people watching on YouTube. You should count yourselves as some of the most committed people in this election. First of all, because you're coming here to this organizing call. And I want to tell you how much power you have. So just this past weekend, I was in Phoenix. I flew back in yesterday. I was in Phoenix with a bunch of people who are involved in LA local politics out here. And we all went out to Phoenix in order to knock doors with the wonderful Union Unite here. And our group, there are about a dozen of us, we went on a knock doors, and our goal was to get ballots, right? To literally ask people, hey, not only do you have a plan to vote, but do you want to fill out your ballot with me right now and put it in the mailbox right now? In order to like lock in those votes for Kamala Harris. When we did that, Our little group, right? We got about 30 ballots the entire weekend. There were a dozen of us going out, 8-hour shifts twice. Might not sound like that many ballots, right? But the entire headquarters that we were volunteering as a part of got 400 ballots that weekend, of which our 30 were part, right? Because there were multiple volunteer groups going out. And Unite Here has 8 headquarters around the Phoenix area, each of which we can assume also got 400 ballots, right? So that means that's about eight. Oh boy, I'm bad at math, but it's a little bit less than 4,000 ballots, right? That they got over the course of that weekend in Phoenix. And when that really becomes powerful when you realize that Arizona went blue in 2020 by just under 10,000 votes, and our one organization that we were volunteering as a part of was able to get 4,000 votes just in that one weekend. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the individual effort that you put out, getting votes one by one, really, really matters. And here's the other really cool thing. One of the reasons it was really hard to get ballots was because almost everybody that I talked to in Arizona already had a voting plan. I would knock on the door and say, hey, are you voting this year? We're out here supporting Kamala Harris. Do you support her as well? And Ruben Gallego, the senatorial candidate there. Are you ready to support them? Do you want to fill out your ballot? And almost everybody who said no to do you want to fill out your ballot right in front of me, the reason they said no was they said, I am going to fill out my ballot with my daughter later today, and we're going to mail them together on Monday, right? They had a firm voting plan, and that is the most important thing that you can get from people. Are you going to vote on election day? Are you going to vote early? Are you going to vote? Are you going to mail it in? Are you going to go to the drop box? And getting them engaged so that they know exactly how they're going to do it. And that gave me so much positivity because I was like, wow, even the people who I am not getting to achieve my goal of filling out their ballot right in front of me, well, guess what? They are committed to voting as well. And those people far outnumbered the undecideds, far outnumbered the people who are hostile. People are really, really engaged in this election, but they need that extra push, right? And that's where you guys come in. Being engaged in your own communities, whatever you can do, knocking on doors, phone banking, whatever you can do to get those individual votes across the finish line. Because at this point, the election is a turnout game. It matters how much we are able to turn out our actual people. At the end of the day, the election does not come down to polling. It doesn't come down to narratives. It doesn't come down to what they're saying on CNN. It comes down to millions of people individually making the decision to take out their ballot, fill in bubbles, and put it in the mailbox or go to the ballot box on election day. And they are affected by literally everything in their lives. Is it raining? Did their car break down? Do they live alone? Do they have people in their community who are encouraging them to vote? That is what really matters, that individual decision making. And the more that you can influence it, the better. And the side that will win this election is the side that motivates those people most effectively. And you can do that on a one-on-one basis. This election will be won by millions and millions of one-on-one conversations. So do not underrate your own power. I will turn it over so that we can actually educate you guys on how to do this because I know you're fired up and ready to get to work. And I just cannot, by the way, this is the cure for election depression, right? If you are worried about, oh my God, which way is our country going? The cure is to get out there and pound the fucking pavement. Get out there and do it. And thanks so much for being on this call.
Thanks, Ad. Thank you so much, Adam. A thing that is absolutely the case is I live in Washington, D.C. A lot of the people I know work in politics. Even among the people who work in politics, everybody is worried about the fact that this is solidly a 50-50 election. And I can't tell you how many people I know who have decided that they're going out to Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Arizona, Nevada for the last couple of weeks of the election because they feel so anxious about it and they're just getting out there. We know that not everybody can do things like that. We work in elections, and so, our organizations will often let us do things like that. But mostly that is to demonstrate the fact that we all understand how high the stakes are right now, and we need to get out there and do everything that we possibly can to help get Vice President Harris across the finish line. Next up in the program, we're gonna get an awesome training. Adam talked about making a plan to vote quite well. So nice job, Adam, relentlessly on message. And I'd like to introduce our trainer for tonight from the National Democratic Training Committee, also a fellow Texan. You can't necessarily blame him for being from Dallas, but that's okay. Not everybody's perfect. I'd like to introduce to y'all Davis. Davis, it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. Oh, and I'll take that ribbing from a Houston person. I am just super duper excited to be here with folks. That was a hell of an intro. And now let's go ahead and talk about how to help supporters make a plan to vote. As you are getting towards GOTV, as you're starting to get out the vote, how do you turn some of those conversations, some of those friendships, and some of that direct voter contact that you're doing into, okay, let's turn that into a plan. I'm going to just briefly introduce myself. My name's Davis Monishagan. I've worked at just a gazillion campaigns in Colorado, in Texas, and Iowa, and Georgia, Oklahoma, a couple times in there. I have organized, I've been a regional, I've managed a few times, I've been a finance director, I've been a Get Out the Caucus director for a couple presidentials in there, and now do product and software development for state Democratic parties. So I'm really, and train with NDTC. So I'm very, very excited to be with y'all today, to learn with everybody, to hear from everyone, and to talk about how to put that plan, make a plan with folks to get out there and go vote. Two things. If we are successful today, I hope you will take away how to find reliable voting information. And maybe then we'll kind of get into and describe how to guide voters through the process of following through on some vote plans. But I'm going to go ahead and throw an icebreaker. And I know folks are on YouTube chat, and a few might get lifted up. But what are some things what is information that people would need in the process of making a plan? It'd be things like, maybe where's my polling location? How do I vote early? I'll give folks just a second to kind of pepper in some responses. Great. Have a few responses coming through. How to get a ballot, how to request ballots, asking all the right questions on this one here. Let's talk about it. So everybody has kind of already said this. So you a little bit took away the thunder here, but some of the questions that folks are going to ask are, am I even registered to vote? How do I do it? Where do I go to do it? When can I go to do it? Do I need to bring anything with me? Now, all very great questions, and all questions we're going to talk about working with folks throughout this training on. I'll just say, it's kind of an editorial note, at this point of the calendar, we're really focusing on mobilization of people you think are going to vote with us, and people that have maybe previously said they're going to vote, maybe that are your friends, that your family, and we're kind of getting them over that last mile of, okay, early voting has started. You have a ballot. Early voting will be this weekend. We're really trying to get those conversations and saying, great, you're going to vote with us. Let's go ahead and get you there. None of these you need to memorize. We're actually going to walk through just some of those things right now. Before anyone, you or anybody in your network, can cast a ballot, it's important to make sure you check your registration status. Some states have some registration that you can still register. Unfortunately, in other states, sometimes right now, the registration deadline is passed. But you always want to start with that, of making sure you can help them check their registration. There's a lot of different websites that'll help you on this one, and we're going to talk about those throughout this training. Two that I'm just going to mention right now, the Democratic National Committee has iwillvote.com. That is great. They devote hours and hours and hours to making sure that that information is accurate, that you have all the voting location times on there, that folks can get help. There's also nonpartisan groups like vote.org, 411. We're going to walk through a few of these. You don't have to memorize these at all. A lot of the times, they're going to be in the materials that you get after this call. But a lot of the times, even kind of Googling I will vote, they help try to get you there. So let's keep on talking about the three primary ways that folks vote. First is mail and absentee. Those terms are synonymous, just a ballot that you vote in the mail. Two is early in person. where you go. I think, speaking of Texas, I think this might have started in Texas either this weekend or this week. And then the last one is election day in person. Now, you're going to hear a lot of this training. We're really going to try to talk about trying to get them to go early. Adam mentioned, we want you to fill out your ballot and mail it now. What this allows us to do is be more efficient with our get out the vote efforts and try to, I call it get points on the board. Like, we want to get that ballot in. We want to get it, make sure that's counted. So then somebody else, whoever goes to Arizona next weekend, they don't have to chase that ballot. That ballot's in there. And a nice thing that you can tell folks around this is the sooner they get their ballot in, the sooner people stop contacting them because they've already voted. They don't have to worry about them anymore. So we really, 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 as much as possible, we want to try to get folks to vote in person. Now, I mentioned different states are a little bit different, and we can't give, if I tried to give a training on the nuances of all 50 states, different voting requirements, we'd be here all night, and you don't want that. So I'm going to kind of go through this relatively quickly just to give you kind of a sense of what the differences are and how to look at those differences. There's three kind of ways that states separate themselves on this. The first one's eligibility requirements. Some states like Washington or New Jersey, they might allow all registered voters to vote by mail. Like, anybody can do it. There's no excuse absentee, or in some cases, they go ahead and just send everybody a ballot. That's one way. Deadlines are another way that states can be very different. Some states say we need to have received your ballot by noon the day before the election. Other states will say as long as it's postmarked, we can accept your mail-in ballot anytime. That's fine. So a lot of variability on that. And the last one is ID requirements. Some states require a valid photo ID to vote and register to vote. Some states, as long as you've had it once, they don't care. We're going to go through some kind of examples on both ends of that so I can give you kind of some context on how states specifically might be different. The first one on the far edge of this, an example, is Alabama. In Alabama, they don't have what's called no excuse vote by mail or no excuse absenteeing. You have to kind of attest that you won't be physically in your county on election day or have some sort of physical disability. In Alabama, if you're voting by mail, they have to have completed ballots by noon on election day, and there's some pretty stringent voter ID requirements on that. So that's kind of one side of the spectrum here. Other side of the spectrum is Washington, where Washington automatically sends mail-in ballots to every single registered voter. It just goes to your house. That's just how they do it. Completed ballots are fine as long as they've been postmarked by election day and received at least 5 days after election day. And if you're a previous Washington voter and you registered in person and provided ID at the time, they don't need you to provide ID for your vote by mail. So just very quickly, 2 examples, but every state's very different. And where to find, there's a few different places to find, okay, well, I live in Idaho, or I live in Oklahoma. Where to find information on that? First place to start is always your official government sites, your local board of election, your secretary of state. We'll say sometimes they can be kind of buried in pages, buried in there. And so places like I Will Vote and vote.org and Vote Save America are really 3 great places that just says, where do you live? You know, might ask your date of birth or something, and they're going to try to get you to your accurate polling location without clicking through too much. You're busy. You might not want to go through a lot of other stuff, and they're going to try to get it to you quickly. So the great thing about this is if you're doing any formal organizing activities like canvassing, a lot of the times on the literature that the organization gives you, it's going to be a voter protection hotline where people can ask for this information, or it might be a campaign's website that'll send people to I Will Vote. So you won't need to remember this. It'll be there for you. Finally, on the last one, there's just, even outside of those groups, there's a lot of other great nonpartisan voting resources. Ballot Ready is good. Rock the Vote is good. Vote 411 is a good example that you see in this screenshot right here. There's just a plethora of information, especially if folks are looking for kind of really nonpartisan spots. There's all kinds of places that you can send them to. And those places might even have sample ballots so they can make sure they know exactly what's on the ballot and how to vote and all those sorts of things. I'm going to take a pause real quick, and we're going to uplift some comments from the YouTube chat, but are there any, what are some of the questions that you might have so far on finding the information about getting somebody to register to vote? Had a person ask, is it okay not to vote for every race? You certainly can. We encourage you to vote for Democrats up and down the ticket, though. But there could be things that you don't have an opinion on or you don't know that you can decide to leave certain questions. But definitely vote for Dems up and down your ticket. Perfect. We keep on going through this. Now, I've given you the information now, how to find registration, how to find polling locations. Let's talk about the meat of this, is actually helping guide others through vote planning. We call this in the ecosystem the make a plan conversations. And what we really try to lean on are interactions with voters that use a little bit of social pressure to really try to motivate them and move them to make a specific plan. There is a significant body of research out there that suggests that walking through mentally, well, when are you going to go? How do you imagine you'll get there? Those sorts of things can really help folks actually make it in their mind and can drive folks to the polls. Our lead tech on this call is going to drop a great resource doc about specific elements of making a planned conversation. If you're doing this with a party entity, those are probably in your script as well. You're going to see a lot of this. Like, oh yeah, I saw that in a phone banking script. So when do we do this? When do we engage in make a plan combos? Anytime you're interacting with anybody right now is when to do this. Whether it's formally canvassing and going door to door, whether it's phone banking or text banking, whether it's literally calling up your brother to make sure that your brother has a plan and your brother's going to do that, and any interaction you might have with your neighbor. Right now is the time for those make a plan combos. It's GOTV time in my list. I've got my GOTV list that I'm like, these are the 8 people I haven't talked to in probably 2 years, because every 2 years I'm saying, hey, got to make sure, I think you might have moved. Have you changed your registration? That's when you want to go through that. You do not need to memorize this. I know that this is a lot of text, but it's just going to demonstrate for you kind of some of the vote planning tactics in some of this. I know if you attended last week when we talked about canvassing and phone banking for the NDTC, you might have some of this memorized, but this is some of those things where a good vote planning conversation has some gentle social pressure right here. I've heard a lot of them are planning to participate in early voting this year. Voting is easy and convenient. Can I count on you to vote early? If that's successful, you would go through and you would give them some information. You'd say, great, that looks great. Just so you know, we can actually get you, we can make sure you go vote early. It's going to be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And this is where you kind of layer in and say, do you think you'll go before work? Do you think you'll go after work? Do you think you might go on lunch? Who might you bring with you? Those sorts of questions. You always want to make sure folks know it's easy. Voting early is easy. You get it over with. You get a nice little sticker. You can show it off. In a lot of these conversations, if somebody says, oh, no, like I'd rather go on this day, or I'd rather do this, you might have like a branch conversation to say, hey, it's really helpful for Vice President Harris if we're getting out there and we're voting early, because that means we don't have to worry about you. Your vote is banked. We can go and spend our time on somebody else. Now, zooming in specifically on social pressure, what we're trying to communicate on this is voting is positive, and it's a normal and desirable thing that a lot of people are doing. In this example, you were emphasizing the community aspect of voting, talking about how, hey, I'm doing it. Your neighbors are doing it. Everybody is doing it. We want to show this is like the thing that people are doing. And again, we want to layer in, if at all possible, want to push folks to voting early. Vote, and vote early. The 3 steps to this is assuming you might not know this person, you're phone banking, you're canvassing. Short introduction where you talk to them. Say, hey, my name's Davis. I'm knocking on behalf of Vice President Harris. How are you doing today? You make your ask in your presentation of voting. And then you always thank them at the end and tell them, we appreciate your time. People don't have to. They could slam the door in your face. And we really appreciate folks taking the time to talk to us on that one. So let's break into that. The introduction of a make a plan conversation for a person you might know is just a hi, can I speak with person? You always want to, especially if you're doing this for a campaign, you want to confirm that they're the person on the list. You're talking to the right voter that the campaign really wanted to talk to and one of their targets. And you want to always also identify the candidate you're representing. This could be I'm with the Travis County Democratic Party. This could be the Arizona Coordinated Campaign, or it could just be in a place where it's solely the president. It can be any entity, but just let them know who you're with there. Second part of this, we move to the ask section of the script. This is where we're really layering in some of that social pressure. We're stressing the ease of voting. We're focusing on the process, and we're kind of trying to not needle them, because we're not needling voters, but we're really trying to kind of get out, hey, when exactly do you think you'll go? Do you think you'll be bringing anyone with you? Is there usually traffic on some of that on that road? That's where you kind of want to get into exactly when do you intend to do this? And then finally on this one, I think you'll probably remember from the previous week's discussion that only a small percentage, when you're knocking doors or making phone calls, do you actually get to talk to. That's okay. That's very normal. But we just went in with a thank you to tell them, hey, I appreciate you taking the time. And this is also, I find this especially applicable in cases where maybe you thought it was a get out the vote conversation, but they're still undecided and they wanted to talk a little bit about the issues. Make sure you provide resources for them and say, hey, I know you're still undecided. I know, Vice President Harris really appreciate your vote. I'd appreciate if you took this lit and maybe thought about it and kind of a last touch to let them know, hey, like, I thank you for your time. And here's something to read over. That little just last touch can go a long, long way. Now, some of the most important things, and this is again, this is good when you're friend banking to kind of know and track if you track this, but especially if you're working on behalf of a campaign, you need to take clear notes and track every result. This really, really helps us know if we need to go back to that person, how that person answered favorably. I won't get into all the nuances of what those contact attempts do, but they're really, really helpful. So if you're using paper, make sure those boxes are clearly checked. If you're using your phone and doing minivan, make sure you're clicking the right thing and clicking next, or syncing in some cases. It's very, very common. You'll get more non-contacts in a shift than you'll get vote to plan ones, but those start to add up. It was mentioned earlier, even if you're like, oh, wow, there were 10 of us and we only talked to, 100 people or 50 people. When you aggregate that across the country, those things start to add up. And it is wild to look at some statewide victories and say, wow, that was only 3 votes per precinct when you start to get down there. So always be sure to document every interaction. When you're talking to your friends and family, this is a thing like, it's good to have multiple touch points. Hey, early voting started. Want to make sure that you're going to do it and walk through that make a plan conversation. Put a calendar reminder on your phone. If they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to go on Friday, put that reminder there. And on Friday morning, be like, hey, all good to vote this morning. Still all of that. So you're layering in some more of that voter contact. And you're always kind of making sure to follow up to say, you told me you're going to vote. Let's make sure that you do it. We got any questions from folks in the YouTube chat? There was a question earlier that I just got about, do the vote finder sites work for everyone? They do. I Will Vote is a great example here of maybe if even the polling locations hadn't been finalized, they'll tell you on there exactly. But they do meticulous work. A lot of these groups, especially the Democratic National Committee, do meticulous work to make sure drop boxes are mapped as best as possible where you can go drop your ballot off. They do really, really good work to make sure that early vote locations or early vote centers are mapped so that I can type in and find where I can go vote early. And then finally, on election day, they try to do as best as possible to get national results. There's been a couple of questions about how to drive folks to the polls. There's a lot of great organizations that kind of do this, that provide this and make that a service. I've always personally, with me, started with my friends on that, knowing friends that might not have a ride or might need some help, and just be like, hey, do you want to go on this day? We can go get a beer after if you want to. And just kind of started with my network. But there's a lot of great groups out there that also kind of organize that and do that. I know there's also some kind of rideshare political groups as well that organize some of that and are looking for donations. Great question got asked here about how can you reach people that are disillusioned by both candidates? This is where, I mean, just White Dudes for Harris, I like lean in a lot, and I always use personal story on this and say, I just like, I understand being conflicted about the election, and I have friends and family that aren't going to vote the same way I do, and I love them just the same. But when I think of when I think of a world that's led by Donald Trump, I just I find it a little bit embarrassing. I can't believe we're doing this. This person that demeans others, that isn't secure enough in his masculinity to just like stand on his own and be a person of his word and honor. It I just I wouldn't raise my kid that way. I'd be really disappointed if my kid was that way. And who would I want? Who would I want being president in 20 years and looking back on that? So this is where I know this isn't a story about about telling your personal story, but when it comes to that one, I usually get real personal with people, and I say, when he demeaned folks with intellectual disabilities, and I have family members who have intellectual disabilities, like that's not presidential. That's yeah. There's all kinds of choice words you could use there, but I definitely encourage you lean in on your personal story and lean in of what brought you to support the vice president. It doesn't have to be a campaign talking point. It can just be, I'm embarrassed by this guy, and I really want somebody here that's fighting for the future and fighting for our families. Keep going. Takeaways. Getting towards the end here. If you leave this, these are the four, with 4 nuggets of information, these are the 4 that I want to stick with you. Focus conversations right now, we're at the time of, you shouldn't be really trying to persuade people that are definitely voting for Trump. You're really looking for people to mobilize, to get logistical about voting. So be thinking of, you might still do some persuasion, but be thinking about folks that's like, hey, they just need a nudge. They need a nudge to make sure they're going there. Takeaway 2, use that gentle social pressure. Ask the win when people are like, yeah, I'm definitely voting. Try to get that win as best and try to walk through those details. I cannot stress enough how much the analytics folks just preach this to us in campaigns. Number 3, always make sure you're logging results, even if that's a mental note, if it's your friends and family, but especially if it's a campaign, make sure you're writing that down or you're entering that in Minivan. And then finally, if organized individual friends and family, make sure you're following up with them. These could be people that the campaign doesn't have phone numbers for, they're not on their radar. You could be the only person that's going to mobilize that person, and take that seriously and get after them about it. Finally, this is my trainer evaluation. These are really, really, really helpful for me. They help me grow as a trainer. I learn a lot. I read, I obsess over these evaluations. So please, please, please scan this QR code and give me a trainer evaluation. It helps me get better. And I enjoy hearing what y'all think about topics. It's great. It's one of the highlights of these trainings, is getting to do that. And then finally, I want to say thanks. And there's a lot of opportunities to take action and ways to get involved. You're going to get a lot of those in the chat. Thank you. Like I just really appreciate you being on right now and taking the time for this. And it's really exciting. This is kind of the highlight of my week to be here with you all. So yeah, Ross, I think I'm
Awesome.
gonna kick it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Davis. That was really great. And I just want to let everyone know, and I promise this was not planned, but I actually have my ballot on my desk here with me, and I will tell you all that I'm making a plan to vote, which is I will be filling out my ballot tomorrow. In Washington, D.C., we have ballot drop boxes. There is a ballot drop box a couple of blocks from my house. I'm going to go for a morning walk. It's supposed to be nice outside. I'm going to drop my ballot off. I'm going to get a nice cup of coffee from a lovely coffee shop down the block. And then I'm going to start my workday. So that is, I think I did all the things I was supposed to do to tell everyone what my plan to vote is. So now everyone can hold me accountable. You all have my email and you can just like tweet at me or Facebook or DM me or whatever. So with that, I want to say thank you again, Davis. Love the training. And, we have one more training coming up. So I am really excited. This is sort of the first time we've ever done one of these calls quite like this, where we've done two of these in the same one. I'm really excited to introduce Aaron, who is over at Men for Choice, who is going to, one, talk to us a little bit about how to talk to other dudes about abortion. And he's also going to talk to us about volunteer opportunities that they've got coming up. And for what it's worth, we've already shared their volunteer link a couple times in the chat. If folks want it, we will share it again. For folks who want to ask for it, we will also be sending all of these links out via email after the call, probably sometime tomorrow morning or early afternoon. So with that, I will kick it back to Aaron.
Thank you, Ross, and it's good to be with everyone here tonight. I think by definition, if you're joining this call, you're the kind of person who's looking to do something. And what I'm going to talk about is how we can be active as allies for abortion rights. We know that this is one of the primary issues on the ballot, and I think as men, even though the majority of men are pro-choice, and I suspect nearly all of us in this space tonight are pro-choice, we don't necessarily know how to act or what to do, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. My name is Aaron Boslin, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Men for Choice, where we educate, activate, and mobilize pro-choice men to get off the sidelines and into the fight as allies for reproductive freedom, not as the leaders of this movement, but as supporters, so that men are doing our part, because we know that men like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are perfectly comfortable speaking out on abortion. It's just that it's in exactly the wrong direction. And so men like us, guys like us, need to do something. I'm going to start going through some crucial details and information to think about in this White Dudes for Harris space. For one, if you look at a list of these headlines, all of these headlines were pre-Roe v. Wade being overturned. The question started being asked more in the Trump years about why is it that we don't see men, even though 61% of men in the United States are pro-choice, why is it that men aren't doing their part on this issue? And Men for Choice was started in Illinois in 2015 to directly address that question. And we've been working to get passively pro-choice men off the sidelines and into the fight. This isn't about convincing your Uncle Gary at Thanksgiving when the election's already done to stop being anti-choice. This is about the rest of us who believe that everyone should have the freedom to control their own body, to do something rather than just think in the abstract how fucked up it is that J.D. Vance is saying what he's saying or doing what he's doing. We unconditionally support the women and impacted individuals who have been leading on this movement for generations, and make sure that, unlike too many men before, we aren't staying passive, that we're doing our part in this moment where we're called so clearly to act, to do something. What we do is we have a year-round organizing model where we train 18 to 28-year-old men in a 10-week training program. Just in this year, for example, they ran 330 educational events just this year. And that is how we build our base, because in the course of our fellows learning how to talk about this issue and learning how to move other men to action on this issue, we're building a base that we're then able to leverage to support our pro-choice partners throughout the country, the women and impacted individuals who have been leading on this movement for so long, but without the support of men, making sure that we've organized the men to then deploy in moments like this. When so much is at stake. We also run digital campaigns, ads to shift culture. And what I'm going to talk about in a moment as it relates to messaging on this, how do we as guys talk about this? That the most important thing to remember is just by being a guy and speaking out on this issue and doing it as an ally and as a supporter, you're intrinsically changing culture. And how can we each be that in our own spheres of influence when so much is at stake in this moment? So why don't men engage? You know, you might be thinking that right now. I know when I got an email about Men for Choice in 2019, it was from this listserv, and I never read the emails from that listserv. But for some reason, the idea of Men for Choice starting to expand nationally struck me. And I found myself thinking, well, you know, I'm a progressive guy, and I just worked for my Democratic Party, and I'd been a teacher, and I was active in my teachers union, and I felt like I was doing a pretty good job advocating for a better society, doing stuff for a better society. And I couldn't remember the last time that I'd said anything or done anything as it related to being pro-choice. And I think for a lot of us, that's the case. Slightly less since Roe was overturned, but we still might be thinking, oh, you know, I don't know about me. And certainly, if not you, people you know are thinking this. So why don't guys engage? There are four main reasons we've identified over the last decade. The first is that men don't understand the harm and the impact of attacks on reproductive freedom. Just don't know it. You know, you sort of put the conversation in an abstract place as opposed to thinking about what does it mean for women to be denied care? What does it mean that during a miscarriage, women in Florida are not able to be given medical care because doctors fear prosecution from the state? We just don't think about that, and we don't know that. And if you don't understand the harm, then you don't feel called to act or feel any ownership of the issue. The second, and this is a common one, I'm sure every single one of us has thought this before, maybe have thought this in the last few minutes, is that we treat this as a women's issue that doesn't impact men, that it impacts women, but not us. The third is that we don't see an entry point into the movement. We don't see a place to speak up. And the final one is we don't see a game plan for how to engage. And so all of those things together are how we address in our organizing model. And I'm going to share some actions that you can take with us, that we make sure that men understand how bans hurt people, families, community. We make sure that men see themselves as stakeholders in this fight with something to lose, that we create an entry point for men and we train men how to engage and organize other men. And we give a simple plan for what to do and to say. This stuff is dire. You may have seen the story about Amber Nicole Thurman, who was someone who died as a result of Georgia's abortion ban that Donald Trump put into effect by appointing the judges who overturned Roe v. Wade. And so, are we the kinds of guys who are going to see women literally dying as a result of Trump abortion bans, or are we going to do something? So what are some messages that work? I'm going to go through these quickly, and then I'm going to share the messaging deck with you at the end if you take an interest in this. But how do we talk about this as guys? How are we supporters and allies, and how are we passive in that active in that rather than passive? The first is to think that this is not a fight about abortion. It's about freedom and power and control. No one can be free if they don't have the power to control their own body and reproductive decisions. How is any pregnancy made better when someone like Ted Cruz has more say in it? No one's benefiting in that situation. Everyone should have the freedom to live their own lives and make their own decisions. On that note, no judge or politician should have the power to control if, when, or how you build a family. Third, if the government has the power to control your wife's body, the government has the power to control your family. And it may not be your body under attack, but your rights are, your freedom is, your family is. No person should be forced to be pregnant against their will. That puts it right in the place of the harm caused to the pregnant person to be forced to carry a baby against their will, and that no one should be in that situation. And finally, and I can't stress this one enough, To the question of whether or not men should be speaking up on this issue, it's a moot point because men already are speaking up on this issue, but only men like JD Vance and Donald Trump and men who want to ban and criminalize abortion. And so, because anti choice men have been using their voices and power for so long to control women's bodies and reproductive decisions, it's time for men like us to speak up too. That your voice is needed, and specifically in the next 2 weeks, your time is needed. Ron talked at the beginning about the importance of asking people to do something. These are a list of actions we have coming up. We have them all throughout the country, both virtual and in person. And Ross and Fletcher have been sharing the link. But as you can see, we have actions in Florida. We have actions in North Carolina, Arizona. We have an in-person canvas in Miami Beach this Saturday. We have a series of actions coming up for the week of the election. And so if you are concerned with what the attacks on reproductive freedom mean, and you haven't done anything yet on as a guy, this is the perfect chance to step up. You can scan this QR code right now, and this will have a list of immediate actions that you can join. Many of them are either fully virtual or have a hybrid option, so you can join that way. But it is so important that each of us do something. We've all been talking about this tonight. Davis outlined so well the process of voting and showing up. And we need to make sure that we are leaving nothing on the field, that we are making sure that we're doing our parts. And if you're interested in the messaging guide and you want to see more about those frames and you want to begin the process of speaking better on this issue and more effectively on this issue, especially to other men, you can scan that QR code right there. And with that, I want to give a big thank you to Ross and the whole team at White Dudes for Harris. I know we're sure going to be doing our part, and I hope that many of you join us in these actions so that we can contact as many voters as possible and on November 5th, celebrate a big win and put Trump to bed once and for all.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. That was really great. And for those who are asking in the chat, we will be sharing all of these resources out with folks after the call. We'll share the form one more time. And I just want to say, like, thank you so, so much for everyone getting on this tonight. Thank you for those who've been on multiple of these. Next week is going to be our last organizing call because we will be a week out from the election and we're not going to do one of these on election day. So, you know, it will all be 100% focused on making sure people get out and have opportunities to go out and volunteer in the last week ahead of the election. So stay tuned for more information on that. And thank you again. It's always humbling to see all the people on, all the people participating in the chat, all the folks who are hungry to get out there and do things to help get the vice president elected. And none of this happens without each and every one of you. So thank you so, so much for being on tonight. And you'll get 6 minutes back in your evening. Have a really lovely night.